free to express their opinions, and they have disappeared. So, you know, you're taking on board your comments about whether or not they should be calling people out onto the streets without a permit. That's one thing. But these men are now out of the public's mind and out of anyone's reach. And they have apparently not been given any chance to speak their mind, or they don't have any access to legal representation or even any suggestion as to, you know, how they might get themselves out of this. So what is to be done here?
Interesting argument. I do agree with some points that you have mentioned. Well, these two people are the leaders of the pro-reform camp in this country, and they, as leaders, they are expected to provide security and safety for their supporters.
Do they not have any rights?
So far, no, they have the right to demonstrate on the streets in a peaceful manner. They can do that.
Do they not have any rights to actually be represented? They've been taken away. Have they been given the right to be seen by lawyers, to be represented, to have their case heard, to have some kind of formal process?
Well, yes, of course they are allowed to do that. But the problem is that, as I told you, people get killed and everybody blames the other person but themselves. Even Mousavi and Karoubi are blaming the government for the killings, and the government blames them. And also some other partners, some other elements are blaming the foreign agents or terrorist groups, armed terrorist groups and opposition camps. So, I mean, it's a helter-skelter here. I think these two sides should sit down together and find a solution. So far, they refuse to talk to each other. So far, they refuse to recognize their position and their influence in the society. They are not listening to each other.
All right, Anbar Nadari in Tehran, thank you. Let's return to the situation in Bahrain. As we told you a moment ago, there are more rallies planned for Sunday. Abdul Nabi El Ekri is chairman of the Bahrain Transparency Society. Hopefully we've managed to re-establish contact with him in Manama. Can you hear me, Abdul Nabil?
Okay.
Can you hear me, Mr. El Ekri?
Yes, I hear you, but try to raise your voice a little bit.
OK, well, let me ask you this. Hassan Mushaima returned to the country and spoke to the crowd on Saturday night. Is this significant?
Yes, of course. There is a de facto situation where people are not taking permission for rallies or for speeches. As you know, he has been pardoned along with other 25 groups who just a few months ago were accused of plotting to topple the regime and undermine the stability. So thanks to the mass movement, all this has been dropped, all these charges have been dropped, they were released and back.
But this raises the question, doesn't it, about what kind of sectarian problems we might begin to see in Bahrain. 70% of the country is Shia, and they long have complained about not having rights in the country, or at least rights that are significant enough given the size of that population. Do you think that the return of this cleric may well begin to fuel some kind of tension amongst the Shia and the Sunnis?
Not at all. I think, on the contrary, I mean, he has a lot of influence on the masses, especially the non-organized masses. And he's, I think, in a way, he has engaged in dialogue starting last night with Sheikh Al-Salman, the head of the biggest blog. And he is going to talk to others, and we are going to talk to him. We, as a coalition, national coalition, made of hundreds of intellectuals and activists from the spectrum. So I think if you have a leader who have influence and you talk, so it is possible to reach national consensus.
Okay, well,
the agenda is not sectarian. I mean, his supporters are mostly Shiites, but he has no sectarian agenda.
All right. Well, you say they are going to have talks, and we've been hearing about talks for a number of days now. Everyone's talking about talking, but not much seems to actually be achieved. Is there going to be any ground given by the government, and is it going to be enough to satisfy the protesters?
What I am speaking about is the talks among the different factions in the country. I mean, especially among those who are for a change. So this talk is going on. As you see, there are a lot of meetings between even among Sunni representatives and, let us say, secular and Shiite representatives. So, but the talk with the government, there are prerequisites which have been put by the forces of change before any talks with the ruler.
All right, we'll leave it there. Abdul Nabi El Ekri in Bahrain. Thank you for talking to us. Now, in Afghanistan, twin explosions have killed at least 14 people. It happened at a dogfighting ground in the Arghandab district of Kandahar province. A local police commander is believed to have been the target. Now, in Ireland, the main opposition party is getting ready to form the next government. The counting from the general election is still going on, but the ruling Fianna Fáil party is already believed to have suffered its worst defeat in nearly 80 years. Voters blaming that party for the economic crisis. From Dublin, Rory Challens reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, Taoiseach designate Enda Kenny.
He's declared Ireland open for business again. Enda Kenny, the man who's hailed his party the winners in this momentous election.
Thank you.
And the man on track to be Ireland's next Prime Minister.
This is the biggest endorsement of Fine Gael in the history of our party. I thank you for your trust and pledge that we will not shirk in our responsibility or renege upon that trust that you've given us.
All over Ireland, they counted up the anger, vote by vote. This election has galvanised a vengeful electorate. Indications are of over 70% turnout across the country.
At this count in the centre of Dublin, 6 different constituencies are being tallied up. And when all the boxes are emptied and the dust settles, Ireland will have had the biggest shake-up of its political landscape since it became an independent state.
The results, as they came in, pointed to a hammering for the incumbent Fianna Fáil party. Just 15.1% of the vote predicted. That's punishment for its role in Ireland's economic demise.
Those ordinary people all around the country had been let down, and we need to go back to those people. We need to listen to them, we need to talk with them and discuss how we can rebuild. And it's not going to be an easy task. It'll take us 5 to 10 years, but there has to be a space in Irish politics for a centre political movement, and there is no centre political movement if Fianna Fáil disappears.
Any country in Europe thinking of going cap in hand to the European Union or the IMF would do well to look at what's happening to Fianna Fáil here.
There will be chills going up and down the spines of various parties around Europe looking at the results and the consequences of taking such a huge and momentous decision.
The official result comes later on Sunday, but this is already Fine Gael's election. With their likely coalition partners, Labour, they have some unenviable challenges ahead. Enda Kenny is already seeking talks with the EU to renegotiate the terms of Ireland's humiliating $115 billion bailout. The next government will also have to bring unemployment down and implement several years of austerity measures. The Irish people may be getting their revenge, but their pain certainly isn't over yet. Rory Challens, AlJazeera, Dublin.
In New Zealand, the mayor of Christchurch says at least a third of all the buildings in the city must be demolished and rebuilt after Tuesday's earthquake. Officials also say serious questions need to be asked about why some of these buildings collapsed in the first place. 147 people died in the quake, more than 200 are still missing. Survivors have been attending church services on Sunday. Our correspondent Andrew Thomas has joined one congregation.
The cracks caused by the earthquake in the structure of this church are almost imperceptible, but they are there. And significantly, the church tower has moved a little distance away from the main body of it, which makes the whole structure unsound, certainly not safe enough to hold a church service inside, which is why this service is taking place al fresco in the grounds of the church. The vicar was telling me before it began that he's made sure the congregation is a safe distance back, just in case an after tremor comes and does bring the church down. In Christchurch city centre, of course, most of the churches lie in ruins, most famously the cathedral, where it's believed between 20 and 25 people lost their lives when the spire of that church collapsed into rubble. Very important, though, this Sunday that the community can still gather, can still share experiences, get together and relive and explain what's happened this week and try and find some kind of sense through that. This very much part of the healing process for this city, the opportunity to gather and to share.
Well, coming up, we'll have all the sports news, including...
I'm Andy Richardson reporting from Bengaluru, and the Cricket World Cup match the whole of India seems to be waiting for, the co-hosts taking on England.
A popular uprising that shook the country to its core. A defiant president under siege from his people. As the protesters took charge of the streets, we look back at the events that are changing Egypt.
I will stay on the air if I can until the police come
in a special program, AlJazeera gives you a day-by-day account from those that witnessed them firsthand. Egypt burning, at this time on AlJazeera.
Homes have crumbled and many buildings have been left just empty shells.
Tensions are high. Riot police trying to control thousands of Greek protesters on the streets of Athens.
A British court has approved the go-ahead for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to be extradited.
The Gaddafi is waging a war against the Libyan people. They are killing civilians mercilessly. They're using ammunition, live ammunition.
As geeks take on dictators, bloggers turn dissidents, and social networks root for social justice, governments are going cyber, spying on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains, and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on AlJazeera.
Time now for all the sports news. Here's Farah.
Thank you, Tamor. Well, right now, India are taking on England in the group stages of the Cricket World Cup. Demand was always going to outstrip supply when it came to ticketing for the game, but many fans still feel they've been treated unfairly. Andy Richardson is in Bengaluru.
Aside from the cricketing contest that's taking place here in Bengaluru, the big story has been that of ticketing. Many of the fans here really disappointed that despite the fact their stadium has a capacity of around 45,000 people, only 7,000 or 8,000 tickets went on general public sale. Far too many tickets, they say, going to those with connections or those in the corporate boxes. Big problem seems to be the lack of a centralised ticketing system here in India. Instead, regional cricket associations are put in charge of ticketing their own matches. Leaves the ICC, the sport's world governing body, in the rather strange position of seemingly not being in charge of ticketing for their own events. Now, the ICC have said there'll be an online ballot for the semi-finals and final. They hope that will be a much fairer system. But as one local journalist said to the ICC chief executive, Harun Lorgat, that doesn't necessarily help the die-hard Indian cricket fan who doesn't have access to the internet and isn't able to speak